Good evening. I'm Councillor Claudine Russell, the Chairman of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. I'm pleased to welcome you to this meeting of the committee. The committee is going to be broadcast live, recorded for playback on the Council's YouTube channel. Will anyone else be recording the proceedings? I just asked so people at the meeting will know if this will be happening, and I look to Councillor Mackay.
And I will reserve my right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Tradition. If the fire alarm sounds, please remain seated. Democratic Services will give you instructions on the evacuation of the building if necessary. That takes us on to this evening's agenda, and item number 1 is apologies for absence. I have received quite a few apologies this evening, so the ones I've received are from councillors Harper, Higson, Houlihan, Kahili, Parfitt, Sweetman and Wilkinson. Is it something I said? So I will take item number 2, which is the substitute members. So I know that I have Councillor Burt for Councillor Parfitt, I have Councillor Dawes for Councillor Harper, and I have in a minute I think Councillor Cleater for Councillor Wilkinson. Have I got any other substitutes? Can't see any others. So that takes us on to item 3, which is the urgent items. We've got one urgent update, which is to item 13, the Cabinet Forward Plan, and that's because we're hot off the press with this again. So it does our normal highlighting, with the grey items being the ones that have passed the time for pre-decision scrutiny, and you'll see we've got one new yellow one that's been just added on for the new changes to the Forward Plan. So are we okay to take that when we have a look at the Forward Plan in a minute? That urgent update. Thank you. I can't see any visiting members in the gallery this evening, so that takes us to item 5. And are there any disclosures by members or officers? Can't see anybody indicating. Item 6, are there any disclosures of lobbying? No, can't see anyone indicating. So item 7, I move that all items be taken in public. Is that agreed? Thank you. Item 8 is the meeting of the minutes that were held on the 16th of September 2025. I move that these be approved as a correct record and signed. Is that agreed? Thank you. Item 9, we haven't got any petitions. And item 10, we haven't got any questions from local residents. Item 11, we haven't got any questions from members. That takes us to item 12, which is the Cabinet Forward Plan. We've got that on pages 1 to 11 of your agenda. So as I said, we've got the urgent update that's on your desks. So I'll give you a couple of minutes to look through there and see if there are any items which the Overview and Scrutiny Committee would like to conduct pre-decision scrutiny on. Is there anything that anybody would like to raise for a pre-decision scrutiny item? Councillor Dawes.
Well, it's mainly the yellow ones that I would like a bit more explanation on what it is and what that involves.
The yellow one is our annual fees and charges. So that's the paperwork that we get where it puts up any charge that the council would, like parking charges for each individual car park, and it runs through the whole lot like that. So it's something that we get every year. Do you remember it from last time?
I think so. Maybe I wasn't part of that particular one. So that's one of those that we would have to close a session. Is that what it means? That's why it's highlighted, or is it been changed and that's why it's highlighted?
Yeah, it's just so they update the Forward Plan every week, and it, because of Overview and Scrutiny being on a Tuesday, sometimes we get a last minute addition, and that's just gone on there, which is why it's highlighted in yellow.
All right, no problem.
Anything else for pre-decision scrutiny? No. In that case, I move that the Cabinet Forward Plan be noted. Is that agreed? So that takes us on to our committee's work programme, which is on pages 12 to 13 of your agenda pack. So we have actually got one item that we realised already that had been missed off of this, and it was that the committee wanted an update on the renovations at the Archbishop's Palace, and we did actually ask for that to be towards the end of the year, so we haven't lost any time in it not being on here. We can bring it to one of our last meetings of the year. But so as a result, I moved that on page 13, we've got to add in update on the renovations at Archbishop's Palace. But other than that, I moved that our work programme be noted. Is that agreed? Thank you. So that moves us to item 14, which is the Maidstone Borough Community Infrastructure Levy in context. So I will ask officers to open this, but before I do, what this is the last part of this committee's review when we were looking at infrastructure. So we looked at lots of different things to do with infrastructure. We interviewed and questioned lots of different infrastructure providers, notably KCC, as they're obviously one of our biggest partners in the provision of infrastructure. But one bit that we had left was looking at the SIL. The reason we didn't do that at the time in this committee was that there was thoughts around whether Cabinet were looking at the SIL anyway. They've decided not to do that. So to close off that item, we asked in the meeting if we could have an update on the community infrastructure levy in context. So this item will be done as we normally do if we get anyone to overview and scrutiny. We can ask them questions, pick up points from the item, and we've got Mark Edgerton, who's our strategic planning manager, and we've got Helen Smith online, who's our principal planning officer, who'll be able to introduce this and then take any questions from the committee. So over to you, Mark.
We want to use cue. Let's try. Oh, there we go. That's better. Thank you very much indeed, Chairman. I'm going to hand straight over to Helen Smith, Principal Planning Officer, to do the introduction. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Mark. Hopefully everyone can hear me in the room. Good evening, everyone. So as Councillor Russell has already said, this report that's presented tonight follows the last bit of a request from the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, seeking context to Maidstone Borough's community infrastructure levy, just with particular reference to other Kent local authorities that also have an adopted SIL charging schedule. So a bit of background, although you probably already know, Maidstone's SIL charging schedule was adopted actually in October 2017, and it was implemented in October 2018. And it's a non-negotiable charge that's levied on certain types of development in the borough, and it's calculated based on square metre of new floor space that's created. As you'll be able to see in the report, there are broad similarities across the adopted SIL charging schedules of the other Kent authorities, in that we all apply different charging zones for different uses, and they are based on the viability of each type of different development within each geographic location. You'll be able to see in the report that all of the charging schedules include a charge for residential, so C3 use class developments, and the rates actually vary anywhere, depending on location, anywhere from sort of £0 per square metre up to £200 per square metre. All the charging authorities, like us, they set rates for retail development, but these do vary quite a bit depending on the geographic location, as well as the type of retailing and the size of floor space thresholds. So they're not as easily sort of directly comparable. Something else to note is that authorities with strategic sites, they apply a zero charge rate specifically for development of those locations. Ultimately, I suppose, in conclusion, the report says that at this time, Maidstone's current SIL charging schedule is comparable to the other Kent authorities, continues to be an effective mechanism through which we can actually collect additional funds to help deliver infrastructure, not just strategic, but also the more localised infrastructure through the neighbourhood portion across the borough. I'll probably leave it there and open the floor for any questions that you might have on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Helen. I can see Councillor Cook followed by Councillor Dawes. Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I was looking at the differences in terms of the authorities that we've got on page 19, and I actually drew a slightly different conclusion to what the officer had just said, that actually we were quite different to those other districts in that our rural and urban are very, very similar. There doesn't seem to be a huge differential in terms of the sill charge, whether it's rural at £99, which is a lot less than Canterbury, a lot less than Dartford, a lot less than Folkestone. But when we get to the urban, we're more expensive than those because it's 93. Why have we pitched the two, those sort of the rural and the urban so close together? That doesn't make a huge amount of sense in terms of the types of development that you're going to get in rural and urban areas, and the requirement for infrastructure is going to be quite different as well. I'd like some explanation, please.
Mark, thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. So the origin of the community infrastructure levy and the charging schedule itself, the figures that are quoted therein and are applied to the charge, is in the viability assessment that was associated with the original local plan in 2017 and subsequent associated viability assessments that were linked specifically to the community infrastructure levy evidence. So the specialist consultants, RICS Associated Specialist Consultants who undertook that viability work, considered the development that was taking place in the borough, but fundamentally took on board the land values and residual land values associated with all parts of the borough. This is to do with the nature of the residual land value and the viability of individual areas of the borough that plays the most important role, I should say, rather than the sort of the developments and so forth. The developments themselves were tested. Numerous developments were considered to be unsuitable for community infrastructure levy charges. These developments, residential, for example, and retail, were considered to be viable and suitable for charges, but it's the residual land value that was most important. To illustrate the point more directly and technically, which is obviously one of the reasons why we're here, the sill charging schedule in draft form was put out on public consultation. That was considered by all relevant parties, and it was then subject to independent examination by an inspector appointed by the Secretary of State who specialised in viability matters. It was the inspector who had to approve the charging schedule on behalf of the Secretary of State and the costs therein, and agree the viability evidence was robust and sound. So it's been through an independent and robust process, and that's how we got to those charges. Thank you.
Come back?
You can come back.
Just briefly. So in terms of, and I accept the answer I've just been given. I'm not going to dispute what happened, but as we look at the sill charges, a difference of £6 per square metre between rural and urban. What impact would that have on potential development in relation to a 5-year land supply potentially?
Thank you very much indeed. So one of the tests that was applied by the inspector was to whether or not the community infrastructure levy, in conjunction with other charges on development, including Section 106, for example, land values and things like contamination on costs and so forth, was whether or not the community infrastructure levy was still going to affect viability. And the inspector found that, in fact, the viability wasn't going to be harmed significantly by that development. So a balance is achieved in that regard. Having regard to the viability evidence to ensure that not only the community infrastructure levy, but the other costs associated with bringing forward development are considered, and considered that these values were appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to Councillor Dawes, please.
Thank you, Mrs. Chair. I've got a few questions, but actually I really like the questions, so I'd like to add an extra ones to this. You say there was an independent, robust assessment being made about it. And when did that robust assessment happen?
Thank you very much indeed. So the assessment itself took place in 2017, 2018, and that led to the examination that took place in 2018, followed by the associated charging schedule coming into effect, I believe, in October of that year. Thank you.
Go again, Councillor Dawes.
Brilliant. Right. So that comes through, because I did read through the paper, and that's what I read. I found that anything that have been decided in 2017 and 2018 seems out of date to me. We in 2025, it's been 7 years. We had high inflation rates going up. So it does sound a bit weird to me that those costs haven't gone up. And when I see the comparisons with our neighbours in Canterbury, Dartford, Sevenoaks and Folkestone, it really looks like we are the poor neighbours out of them. And I'd really like to see some of those sale tax raised. And in fact, I would like them to be raised maybe opposite to some of our neighbours. Shouldn't the charge for building in rural area be higher than building in a town centre, because they are costing us more in infrastructure in the first place, to trying to cope with the traffic, to trying to cope with the drain, to trying to cope with everything else?
Pass that one back to Mark, please.
Thank you very much. I just need to refer councillors to the table in paragraph 2.5 of the report, and just remind councillors that the charge is not £93 and £99, it's index linked. So the charge does go up every year as well. So we're looking at charges at the moment of £112 and £119 for that, for those urban and rural developments in particular. So it is index linked. It isn't something that has lagged behind and stayed stagnant over time. But I can confirm, of course, that there are, of course, other factors that have to be considered in regards to the seal charging schedule. But at this stage, yes, it's considered that the charges remain relevant, and I'm not aware of any complaints at all from the development industry regarding the seal charging schedule itself. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mackay.
Sorry, did I hear you rightly that we don't receive any complaints from developers? Is that what you said?
Yes. Councillor Mackay, I'd just like to clarify the point. I'm not aware of any points received from developers of complaint regarding the seal charging schedule costs. Thank you. That was exactly what I said. Thank you.
I thought you said that would generally indicate that there is a bias towards the developer and that we possibly should be increasing our charges. But what I would say, I'm not being flippant, in any other walk of life, if a customer has no complaints about what is being charged, then it generally indicates that a higher charge could be. But this is 8 years old. Simple question, when will it be reviewed?
Back to you, Mark, and then I promise I will come to Councillor Jeffrey and then Councillor English.
Thank you very much indeed. So I think the best thing to say at this stage is that officers wouldn't recommend undertaking a review, given the circumstances that I've set out to this committee tonight. We're fully aware that local government reorganisation is moving quite quickly. It isn't a matter of just doing a review, unfortunately, councillors. The process itself mirrors pretty much the process of producing a new local plan. So it will need to go through consultation on the draft charging schedule once it has been formulated and drafted. It will then need to go through analysis and through the viability consultants, and then submitted for independent examination for an inspector appointed by the Secretary of State, who will then make relevant modifications before we can then consider adoption. The process itself, I would estimate, being absolutely factual, around about 18 months in order to do that. The other thing we have to consider, again, being utterly factual, the resources available to be able to take forward the current work streams. Priority at the moment is being given, as members have quite rightly stated, pressing on with a new local plan, as well as the Gypsy and Traveller Development Plan document, which is now at Regulation 18C stage regarding site assessments, and that consultation will be starting shortly. We have to meet the government's deadline of December 2026 for submission of that plan under the current planning system. So on that basis, that I think will be my advice. Thank you.
Thank you. Just quickly from the chair, we are about to commence a new local plan. So would that not be something that could be built in alongside that? My other question, and before we move on to a different subject potentially, is that when we did our review as the committee, a lot of the infrastructure providers were saying that they were more fans of Section 106 and Section 278 if they were the Highways Authority. So are we doing a bit of bigger thinking about whether SIL is the right, continues to be or the mix of the two continues to be the right regime for us, or whether it's actually not achieved what we wanted it to achieve when we started out down the road of SIL a few years ago? Thank you.
No, thank you very much indeed for the opportunity to come back on that. Two really important points, I think, for everyone here. First of all, let's think about the nature of the evidence base to support a new local plan. Councillor Russell has quite rightly pointed out that that's hopefully due to start soon, subject to Cabinet approval tomorrow evening, in fact. Now, the way that it currently works is that authorities will have 5 years to produce their plans, but we know the government are intending on bringing that forward. And it's a relevant question, therefore, you know, under a 30-month plan system, could we bring forward a review of the community infrastructure levy with it? So the association of the local plan I've previously explained with viability assessments and the community infrastructure levy. So the viability assessment acts as the bridge between the two areas, if you like. So the viability assessment is one of the last documents that we produce with a new local plan, and will continue to be the case, I think, under the new system. And the reason for that is because you need to know all your policies, both from a site allocation point of view, what are all the site allocations, the spatial strategy itself, you know, with the overall areas that you'll be developing, in conjunction with what we refer to as the development management policies, those policies that help to preserve, protect, enhance, and so forth as well. And they all have a cost. Biodiversity net gain, for example, they all have costs and so forth. So what we have to do at the end of that process, once we have a draft document, is get the viability specialists on board. They produce their independent viability assessment, and then of course that has to be tested at examination along with the other evidence base and the policies in the plan itself. So it's only once we get through examination that we end up being in a position where we have certainty that we have got the sound plan, that it's viable and can be taken forward, and at that point we can then take forward revisions to the community infrastructure levy on the back of that viability evidence and subsequent viability evidence specifically regarding the SIL itself. So that's the first point. And Councillor, could you just remind me of the second point? I do apologise.
It's just whether we were doing that big thought exercise about SIL, Section 106, Section 278.
Thank you very much indeed. Yeah, it can work both ways, and I think you know, it might be something for Helen Smith to perhaps come in on here, because I think we do get varying amounts of money from each, and they do tend to complement each other. The money we get from SIL is non-negotiable, so it does mean that we can support, I think, for example, parishes as well. Helen Smith has further details, as well as bringing forward strategic infrastructure ourselves in conjunction with site-specific Section 106. So perhaps I could bring Helen Smith in with your agreement, Chair. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Helen. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, just to sort of follow up on Mark's point there, I suppose the beauty of having community infrastructure levy is not just that collection for strategic infrastructure, it's also that neighbourhood portion of SIL funds that get collected. So if we were to consider removing SIL or not having SIL and relying purely on Section 106 and 278, we would lose that level of neighbourhood portion of funding that we get through SIL that parish councils can spend on sort of more local infrastructure, and that's either at 15% for parish councils without a neighbourhood plan, or where there's a neighbourhood plan in place, that's 25% of the SIL funds that get given straight to the neighbourhood plan area or the parish council to spend on infrastructure locally. And that is something that we'd have to consider would be lost if we got rid of our SIL charging schedule completely.
Thank you. I mean, personally, I still think it's worth a thought about, because I know that there's little pots sitting everywhere and nothing's ever quite enough. And, you know, we're collecting loads of different things, but I don't see that we've got hundreds of new schools, new GPs, new anything infrastructure wise in particular. I kind of circle round the larger allocations in that, because I know they're coming with SPD. So I think that's they're a slightly different issue. But I do wonder whether it's maybe time to have that thought piece around it. But I've left them hanging for a very long time. So I will come to Councillor Jeffrey and then Councillor English. Councillor Jeffrey first. Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks for some very excellent points and comments. I mean, I do agree that 8 years is quite a long time frame. The world has moved on quite significantly, certainly in the 18 months that we've been in administration. One of the things that's coming through quite clearly is the difficulty of building within the urban area, and the costs of doing so being significantly higher than rural areas, and therefore having a similar SIL value kind of feels a bit wrong, if I'm honest. We did look briefly at whether or not to review this last year. Just after we came into administration, we took a decision at that point that there wasn't a lot of point at that so early on. I think we need to have another conversation about that. I think possibly I want to wait until we've got an idea of the new geographies for local government reorganisation, because it might be worth trying to do some sort of alignment across whatever that new geography might be. But I'll certainly have that conversation with Councillor Harwood, where this sits under, and see how we can fit it into the plan for the work that's going on, particularly around the new local plan that we're starting to get our teeth into the work for. So yes, thank you for some good prods there.
Thank you. Councillor English, over to you.
There is only so much we can do and so much capacity. And if we spend time reviewing SIL, then we will not be doing something else. So we need to be fairly certain that there are drivers suggesting that there is something fundamentally wrong with the SIL charging schedule that needs amendment. And we have, so that will be a starting point, but it can't be a finishing point, because with this process one can't say SIL is too high or SIL is too low, because it is the process itself which delivers the outcome, which tells one as a council whether that is or is not the case. What I would say is that we are in a situation where we know very little about the route ahead of us. The government is talking about councils having to prepare a local plan within 3 years. They have not produced a single example of the guidance as to how to do so. So we are stuck essentially at the evidence collecting and processing stage. So we may have some opportunities to do certain things, but what I would say is that we need to be aware that we use all weapons available to our disposal. It seems unlikely that if we relied just on Section 106 or Section 278 that we would actually end up with a net increase in resources overall. So we need to be very careful about what we wish for, because yes, we might be unhappy with the SIL approach, but we don't want to end up with a situation where we actually end up with less income flowing into MBC or its successor authority because we went in a particular direction because we were unhappy. So we have to be very careful what we do. And that sounds very open-ended and vague. But unfortunately, as we will probably find out in the next item, we know very little about the government's own thinking process, other than that there doesn't seem to be much thinking process going on.
Thank you. Can I just check one point with Mark Edgerton? Section 106 is index linked. Is still index linked? It is.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. And now I've got Councillor Dawes followed by Councillor Oliver, followed by Councillor Mackay. So Councillor Dawes, over to you.
Brilliant. Well, I'll ask all my questions at once. So one simple one, because I'm not very, I'm new at those things, is if it's a commercial building, say, that is changing its use and is now going to be developed in a blocks of flats, does the seal apply to them? And so that's one of them. The other one is, in the comparisons we've got Canterbury, Dartford, Folkestone and Sevenoaks, but I note that there is no comparisons with Tunbridge and Tunbridge Wells, which potentially might be the ones that we get to be part of our LG, our local government review, and our unitary authority. So that would be nice to have a comparisons with real for like. The next one is as you're saying that our numbers 99 and 93 is not our current rate because they have been put with inflation and is now 112, then how does that compare to our neighbours? Does that mean that they're also inflation rate and they have also increased? Because how can we compare if we don't have the right numbers in front of us? And then my last questions. No, that's it. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Over to you, Mark, and maybe Helen might be able to help with that last one, but yeah.
Indeed. So if I try my hand with the first two, and then Helen can correct me if necessary, and answer the third one. So in terms of the change of use, it's based on floor space, new floor space created. So a change of use needn't actually be charged at all for community infrastructure levy, because unless it creates new floor space, it wouldn't apply a charge. A still charge wouldn't apply. The second point was made around Tunbridge and Morling Borough Council and Tunbridge Wells Borough Council. The reason we have cited authorities in that table in paragraph 2.8, so table 2, is because not all authorities in Kent have got a community infrastructure levy. That includes Tunbridge and Morling and Tunbridge Wells, who don't have one at all, so we can't compare them. And I'll bring in, if with your agreement, Chair, Helen Smith for the other points. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Can you help us out with those?
Yeah, I can do. So yes, all of the still charging authorities, all their rates will be index linked the same as ours, and there's a national index that applies. I mean, I can bring up all the various charging schedules and all their different rates. It might be easier perhaps if I put something together in a note that I could share after the meeting, so you could see them all written down rather than me sort of going through them all. But it's a national index rate that's applied, so their rates will inflate by the same amount that our rates inflate by each year.
Thank you. Back to Councillor Dawes.
Okay, so are we meant to be making a decision tonight about? No, we're not meant to. Okay, we're only meant to be noting it. Okay, fair enough.
Actually, it's somewhere between the two. So this is a topic for overview and scrutiny, so it doesn't work like items on any other committee. This is our scrutiny work, so we can ask questions of the officers, cabinet member, and then we can either be, that's absolutely fine, you've answered every single one of our questions, or we can say we would like these recommendations to go forward to cabinet. Obviously, any ideas that anyone has, as usual, needs a proposer and a seconder, and then we'd vote to take that forward. But it's part of our work programme, so it's overview and scrutiny being different to other committees. But we can carry on asking questions and getting the answers for those on our way to either doing something or deciding that we're satisfied.
Yeah. So I'm new at overview and scrutiny because I'm only stepping in Paul's shoes. But if I don't feel comfortable in noting a paper and sending it to cabinet when actually I'd love to see those figures with the inflation rate, because it might change our minds on whether we need to review or whether we want to make a an increased demand on the cabinet to actually review those tariffs?
I think one question to Helen might be able to answer this particular point. So on table 2, where we've got the 99 and 93 for us, and then we've got the other authorities, is that us all before the index charges, or is that us before the index charges and those guys after the index charges? Or are we looking, what I mean is, are we just comparing like for like, and then obviously ours is actually higher than that, given that the index charges have taken it up? Can you just tell me if we're comparing with apples? Thank you.
Yes, you'll be pleased to know you're comparing apples with apples. All of the charge rates there are the adopted charge rates. They are not the inflated charging rates. So all of those would need essentially another column in that table with the currently index linked charge rates. So you are comparing like for like.
Okay, so I don't think we need a briefing note or anything, because I think we can probably all just do that maths to uplift them if we need to across that table.
Can I propose a
yes.
recommendations? Is that something we can do?
Can I take Councillor Mackay and then I'll come back to you, if that's all right? Councillor Mackay.
Thank you. As Mark Edgerton made clear, this is a very complex issue, and I would agree. I think the suggestion that we review it now will be somewhat pointless, seeing as in 2+ years we will no longer exist as an authority, and it does seem rather pointless to start something that you won't be able to finish. I would say that it is disappointing when I read there that SIL and S106 are still not delivering any large items of infrastructure for our communities. That is very disappointing. What I would ask, is there any leeway for the council to say, in this particular instance, for this particular development, we will not charge any, or we will look for more?
I'm going to pass you over to Mark. I think they do viability calculations on some of the developments, but Mark is going to answer this.
Yeah, this is a fascinating one. So we're not in a position where we can charge more. So this is a sort of a ceiling amount that we can actually charge. However, can't charge more for SIL because it's a fixed rate. So the choice that we can have as a local planning authority is either that rate, the rates that we see in the report, or we can choose not to charge SIL subject to a specific exemption that would apply to that development. Now, we have to apply very special circumstances to create that exemption, and such circumstances do exist in this borough. The local plan review has 3 strategic developments located within it. So they are Heathlands Garden Community, Lidsing Garden Community, and Invicta Park Barracks. The policy within that local plan review for those developments specifically says that we will not charge SIL because the policies themselves explain the infrastructure that must be required as part of those developments. They are set out in policy already. So they will be subject to an exemption because of that policy, which has said no charge will be applied over and above the existing infrastructure and Section 106 agreements that will be in place. There are other exemptions, they're minor, things like affordable housing and so forth, but they had to be agreed through the examination process of SIL. But anything less than strategic development, it would almost automatically apply the SIL rate, and that's the intention, to maximise the amount of income. It is purely because those 3 strategic schemes are washing their own faces and more that they will be exempt from SIL itself. Thank you.
What
about 106?
Yes, what Section 106 would apply to those three schemes, Section 106 and Section 278 as well, for example.
I've got Councillor Oliver next, please. No, you're fine now. Councillor Dawes.
Got a few more. I have no idea what section 278 is, which is strange because we've been briefed on section 106 and sales, but not on that one in particular. And then the other thing is, so it's great to know that some of the local plan big development are exempt of sale somehow because they're a bit more difficult to pull through. But would that apply to something, say, an extra development around Marden or Yalding? Would they be exempt, or will they have to pay sale?
I think we found out when we had the Highways Authority that Section 278 is this special thing where it just only applies to highways, nothing else, but it actually makes the developer put in that highways improvement as they do the development. So rather than the Highways Authority building the development, the actual developer does it as part of the planning thing. But I will pass you back over to Mark Edgerton. I think everywhere else would be liable for the fees, but just double check with the officer.
As things stand, there are no other sites that we would apply any exemption to. There is no justification for any other site to have that exemption. We've done that through the local plan review for those three sites because they are strategic schemes. Thank you.
Okay, I can't see anyone else indicating, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to Councillor Dawes to ask any remaining questions and to wrap up because I think you said you had a proposal.
That's it. That's what I wanted to do. I have a proposal. See if anybody wants to second it or not. But I still think that we are a bit low. I know we're all talking about local government review, and that's going to go forwards like tomorrow, like it's bread and butter. But I can see that this government is changing its mind on a regular basis, and I'm not completely convinced that we're going to go through a local government review anytime soon. So I don't want to put to start delaying things to be reviewed when they could be dropped out at the last minute. And to me, the local government seems to be a lot of mess to be cleared up. But anyway, so my proposal is that we review those, we make a proposal to the cabinet to really review it, mainly to increase the tax on sale for rural community, and I'm asking for a seconder.
Before I look for a seconder, I can see Councillor English indicating, so I'm going to go to him.
You can by all means ask the cabinet to review it, but what you can't do is start with an assumption that the charge is too low or too high. That has to come out of the viability work. So if you start with the assumption that it's too low, we're going to run into trouble because we can't do that.
I think I was just going to wrap up by saying, going back to what Mark and Helen both said earlier, which is that the process for reviewing the SIL or revisions to SIL would seem to come at the end of the local plan process itself. It sounds like it's tested at examination, the plans found sound, and then you look to do revisions to SIL based on the viability specialists and what comes out of the examination. So I think we're in a bit of a chicken and egg scenario here. So our next item that we're looking at is kicking off the local plan. I think we could do something around asking Cabinet to do a piece of thinking around Section 106 and SIL as they go forward into the new local plan process, but actually that might come out better in the next item rather than this one. I wonder if we've actually wrapped up a lot of the questions here, and we should probably build that into the next item. So on that basis, I'm afraid I'm not going to second that at this time. I can't see anyone else moving to second. So has anyone else got any recommendations or anything else that they'd like to say? I can't see anyone indicating. So on that point, I'm going to thank officers and Councillor English and Councillor Jeffrey very much for their time. And we're going to move on now to item 15, which is our emerging proposals for a new local plan. That's on pages 23 to 48 of your agenda packs. And this report is going to be introduced by Deputy Leader of the Council, Councillor English. So over to you. Thank you.
Apologies, slight cough there. Still recovering from this flu. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the introduction because I think we've actually covered some of the introductory remarks in the last debate. Suffice to say, we are in a situation where, as a council, we don't know a great deal about the path ahead. So what we are trying to do is gather as much evidence, get as much preparatory work done as we can, so that when we are able to move forward, hopefully the government will eventually publish the regulations. But we are as prepared as we can be in terms of the housing and assess housing need, both for the settled community and for the traveller community, the amount of infrastructure required, the amount of education, commercial, retail space, the amount of housing development. It is quite difficult to actually be certain as to the timetable on this, because, as I say, we are in the hands of the government. But what we have decided, after some considerable thought as to whether it was even worthwhile launching a process at all, what we have decided is that, frankly, whatever local authority emerges from local government reorganisation, that authority will need the work, the evidence, the viability appraisals, transport assessments, etc., that we are currently preparing to undertake. A lot of background work has been done already by officers, and I'd like to thank Mark and his team for that. Sometimes you don't always see the tremendous amount of activity that's going on under the surface, and the policy department just glides on like a swan serenely. But actually, there's an awful amount of paddling going on under the surface. I think that's enough, because in terms of introduction, it'd be easier for people to draw out things for questions. But I'll just turn to Mark to see whether he wishes to add anything at this point.
Thank you very much. I'd like to just quickly hand over to Helen Smith with the agreement, Chair, just to see if there's anything else to finish. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Over to you.
Hello again. I think that was a great introduction. Thank you, Councillor English. I think most of the points are covered there, and really the report that's before you sort of sets out all of those preliminary tasks that we can start undertaking ahead of actually having the proper legislation and guidance in place, and still with that backdrop of uncertainty of local government reorganisation. So we can start engaging early through sort of technical and member workshops to understand sort of right from the outset what the parameters might be for this new local plan. As Councillor English already said, we have to commission a comprehensive suite of evidence base to ensure that all of the proposals and decisions that we make in the new local plan are based on sort of robust and sound data. One of the big things that we can start to prepare for as a future call for sites exercise, where we can ask any landowners to submit pieces of land they want to bring forward for high quality developments in the borough. And I think this time around we would like a much greater focus on land for infrastructure, as Councillor English said, for schools, community uses, and also sort of renewable energies as well. And then on the sort of just on the processy side of things, we'll be working to set out detailed project management documents, a plan timetable, and a project initiation document, and that would actually also set out how we would plan to engage meaningfully and consult with all interested people as we go through that plan making process. And I suppose the final point on this before I sort of stop talking is that whilst we might be embarking on a new local plan, that doesn't mean we stop delivering the current local plan review. That covers the period 2021 all the way up to 2038, and we must still keep delivering all of the planned growth that's within that local plan review. So the new local plan will build upon what's already sort of baked in to the local plan review in that regard. I will stop talking there and hand over for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And we still haven't finished the local plan. So we'll have the local plan review, and the local plan review, potentially all at the same time. I just have one question, actually. which was just been bugging me. So when we had the call for sites last time, obviously there was the selections were made, and indeed from the local plan 2017, and then there were lots that weren't selected for varying reasons. Do they all fall away, or do some of them still, because it's a review of the plan, do they still hang about in abeyance to be looked at when you open the next call for sites? Helen or Mark, either. Helen, thank you. Could you?
Yep, I don't mind taking that, and Mark, please do interject if I'm saying the wrong thing, but I would say that yes, the strategic land availability assessment assessed all of those sites, and you're right, we had sort of red or green sites, and a lot of those green sites we didn't need every single site in the local plan review. They are still there and published in our strategic land availability assessment, and I suppose it would be something to consider as part of the new local plan. Do we go back to those promoters, landowners that made those submissions and say, do you still want them on the table for consideration for the next local plan? That's a decision that would have to be taken, but it might be sensible.
I can see Mark and Councillor English furiously indicating, so go Mark first and Councillor English after.
Thank you very much indeed. So one of the things we will have to demonstrate to the inspector appointed by the Secretary of State is that the sites are deliverable. Now, this is a very rigorous test, and if we were to just carry over the sites from the local plan 2017 call for sites and local plan review call for sites, it would be very difficult for us to demonstrate that they were deliverable, that we had up-to-date evidence, fresh evidence around the site itself, the constraints around the site, and so forth. And most fundamentally, that the promoters and developers were actually willing to bring the site forward. So when we undertake a call for sites exercise with a local plan and any review of a local plan, we will always start by saying, blank piece of paper. We can certainly go back to those who have previously tried to put sites in, but we need up-to-date information, and it's that starting point which is key. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor English.
That's generally correct, although I would observe that there is a policy within the local plan review that does allow certain sites to come forward that were in the previous call for sites, provided, and I stress this, what Mark set out in terms of making sure that these are actually deliverable sites now, not 4 years ago, it is met in terms of that process. So it's not quite a yes or no, but we would need to demonstrate that those sites that potentially could come forward within that document were actually deliverable now in the current circumstances, rather than when the document was originally written.
Thank you. Councillor Field, you're indicating.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to try and be careful with my metaphors here, because planning is always terrifically complex, and I'm trying to kind of just put into layman's terms what I think the recommendations are about, and just check my thinking, really. So point one would be that we are being asked to undertake a process that normally takes quite a long time and do it twice as fast, in the context of also asking senior officers to do local government reorganisation. Point two is asking us that we just agree that that is what central government are asking us to do, and so we will start to track down the road that, on the basis, and this is where I'm going to get into metaphors, that we don't know how far down the road has actually been built, or whether the wheels will stay on the wagon in that process. So point two, we're just being asked to, or Cabinet is being asked in this situation, to trust that central government is going to inform us how, with no extra resources, to perform a task that is horrifically complex in half the time that we normally do, in the context of completely reorganising local government. Right, so I can see Councillor English nodding, so I do seem to have understood. Point three seems to be that we should write, or ask Cabinet to write to the Ministry of Housing, Community and Local Government, and ask them if they wouldn't mind explaining how in the context of those difficulties, we are to achieve that objective. I'm sure that will be a letter welcomed by the current minister and responded to with due haste. And then point 4 is simply that officers will report back to relevant committees and cabinet that central government has or has not explained any of those things. So in terms of scrutinizing this, in terms of what is available to us as a council, it seems to me, and again, I just want to check my thinking, we can either empower the planning department, and Mr. Edgerton and colleagues have my sympathies, to do the best they can with this dog's breakfast of a proposition that central government has put before local authorities with planning responsibilities, or ask them not to, and hope that central government instead comes up with some wonderful alternative to everything that I've just surmised is what this is about. Is that my question ultimately is that a fair summary of the situation that planning authorities find themselves in?
I think through the chair, I think that's a fair summary of where the planning process finds itself at the moment. But I will go back to Mark. There is a sort of another thing to consider, which is that the evidence will always be needed. So I think whether there's a piece of work, whether we don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater, if we are going to metaphors, whether there's a piece of work to be done with gathering evidence for what it is that then comes back when they write the letter back to say, this is exactly what you need to do. This is how you should go about it. These are exactly the units that you should plan for. And this is exactly the timeline that you will be needing to do it in, which I should imagine would be not the response that we receive. I'm going to go, Councillor English, did you still want to come in? And then to Councillor Mackay.
I would say that I think Councillor Field is correct. What I would say is that it's not just about planning. There are a huge number of imponderables here. And unless the government does something about broader economic policy, we can have all the local plans we like, but there aren't going to be enough people to build them. And that is a labour force issue, which the government does not show any signs of even understanding, let alone addressing. So, to be honest, I hate to say it, sound like I'm suggesting this is an exercise in futility, but I actually think that it will be, and whatever local plan we end up with will immediately fall over with the fact that we have not got the labour in this country to build it. And this is an issue that, unless the government does something about labour force planning, is not unique to Maidstone. It's across the country.
Thank you. There was a really interesting, probably layman's and Mark will laugh at it, and so will Helen, but there was an interesting programme on Panorama last night about planning and local plans, and apparently we're supposed to build, baby, build, and they are also going to really penalise local authorities that don't have a local plan. I mean, they haven't done that yet. We're probably the only local authority that's done a local plan and got a local plan review through, one of the few probably in the country, I should imagine, and yet we're still being penalised. So it would be quite nice if there was a bit of carrot, and I'm not sure how they're really going to apply the stick either. But I'm sorry, Councillor Mackay, I did have Councillor Cook first and I accidentally forgot him. So I'm going Councillor Cook and then over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I sympathise, Clive. It's difficult being in the administration, isn't it? I recall when the boot was on the other foot, criticism about undue haste. And here you are trying to do it twice as fast as the last administration did it. There's an element of hypocrisy there, I would venture to suggest, but it's a hypocrisy that has been forced upon you. And I recognise that. I also do have some concerns about the potential for putting a lot of effort, spending a lot of money on something that might never come to anything. Government has clearly said that they intend to reduce the amount of evidence required to prepare a plan. They just haven't told us what that means. And if they were to tell us what that means, then maybe we could, but in the absence of that, what are we supposed to do? I just, I think that I don't feel comfortable with the recommendations because I don't feel comfortable with the situation that we're in. And I know if I said, well, I'm going to vote against this because as a matter of principle, and I think I probably will, that Clive would then say, well, you know, what's your alternative? Well, my alternative is I don't have one at the moment, but then I'm not required to have one because I'm sitting in opposition on this authority. I do. I mean, I do have a question. And that is that in terms of the time frame and the work program and pushing this, are we not really trying to squeeze a quart into a half quart pot, as it were? Because I reckon, you know, if Clive has already said we don't have the resources to do this, so if we're going to do this, what aren't we going to be doing? What's going to suffer in terms of other services that ratepayers depend on us for? What is going to be maybe not quite as good as it was or should be or as currently is? And I know that's a little bit how long's a piece of string, but I'm genuinely concerned. I mean, it seems to me that we are trying to do something that may have very little purpose, and I guarantee that something is going to come down the line because this government is desperately going to try and deliver 1.5 million new homes, and the only way they can do that is by radically amending the planning frameworks. And I think I don't. I mean, the other thing, and forgive me, Clive, but we were talking about infrastructure before, and here is a huge additional amount of housing that is going to be coming into our district, and I'm going to say it. There is no provision for anything other than modal shift, junction improvements, and what have you. What we actually need is new roads to take the traffic around the south of Maidstone, and you've missed the opportunity to do that. And I don't think the public will think kindly on you for doing that.
Councillor English.
Firstly, Maidstone Borough Council is not the highway authority. Any failure to deliver public transport or highway infrastructure is not primarily our responsibility. I could talk about the £14.2 million that was collected but hasn't been spent by KCC. But what I will talk about is a more fundamental issue. Nowhere in the world has ever succeeded in building its way out of traffic and congestion problems. All you get if you build new roads is more traffic. And that is a fact, and you can look at it over and over again, and you can sneer all you like, but even if there were the money available, it would be very, very foolish to go down the route that you're suggesting. However, where I do agree with you, Councillor Cook, and you do lay your finger on a very fundamental point, is that the government can say all it likes about planning approvals, local plans, but if there are no people with spades or electricians or plumbers or other people to build them, it is entirely hypothetical, and we will end up, and I would put money on it, that we will end up in a situation where local planning authorities up and down the country have approved local plans with approved housing allocations that don't get built. And sooner or later, the fact that the demographic trends in this country do not support the amount of housing growth that the government is continuing to argue will support it, that even if it did, we don't have the labour force to build those developments, is going to cause a crashing collision with reality. And yes, we may well have ended up having spent a great deal of public money on preparing for a local plan process that will never lead us anywhere. And I strongly suspect, Councillor Cook, you're absolutely right. However, we are where we are. We do not have the option of guessing that my predictions are right and that your predictions are right and not doing anything, because what will happen is Her Majesty's government will blame Maidstone Borough Council and other local authorities for not doing what the daft things that they want us to do, and they will do them themselves. They will make our staff deliver local plans to fit their ridiculous fantasy castles, and that's what will happen. So I don't like the situation at all. I think we are in danger of wasting public money and spending an awful lot of time on a wasteful process. And if I thought there was any other way of dealing with it and just telling the government to go soak their heads until they've realised how the real world works, then that's what I do. But unfortunately, we can't do that.
Thank you. Come back very quickly. Yep.
You didn't say anything that surprised me there, because we disagree on the things, because we've had 20 years of house building and new residents moving into the to Maidstone without any new roads or anything like that, and yet we still have the congestion, and the congestion is getting worse, and it will continue to get worse. The only other thing I was going to say to the cabinet member, deputy leader, is that the government might do what you said, irrespective of whether we do the work or not. Because if we come up with a solution that doesn't deliver what they want, they will impose rather than anyway. So thank you.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Mackay, Councillor Dawes, Councillor Bett, but before we go to Councillor Mackay, I just wanted to ask a quick question, if I might. On pages 36 and 37, which is the key milestones of the local plan making process, the bit that's in the dark box outline, is that where could we get to without sort of officially kicking off the process? Or if you could explain what that black box is, that would be great. Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, this is certainly turning into an interesting one. Okay, so subject to the relevant provisions being in place from central government, we would be able to give the notice period potentially in April, if we were to, if the provisions were in place, of starting the plan. So it's a minimum of 4 months. We could choose longer if we wanted to. And we've chosen to get the groundwork in place, and that's why we've chosen April, because that is the logical time to start in order to meet the relevant timelines to do that. It is subject to the relevant provisions. I'm going to keep this obviously very technical. Helen and I are here for that purpose. So we would get to that stage and then give notice. 23 months then to produce the plan, 6 months for examination. Genuinely, members, 6 months for an examination took 2 years for our previous plans. It doesn't include time for main modifications, consultations, and so forth. That's 3 months gone. And normally it takes an inspector 3 to 6 months to get their heads round, or inspectors as it is these days, 3 to 6 months to get their heads round the proposals and ask what are called their matters, issues and questions. So one has to wonder whether or not the 30 months is realistic and how they're going to the government are going to make it realistic. So we will wait and see that. But that process, assuming we can start in April, we believe could just about finish 5 years from adoption of the local plan review, that being March 2029.
Okay, sorry, just to it's probably just my brain. So we push go on April 2026, and so that at that point where we push go, we can't stop the process.
Effectively, yes, it's planning, so there are caveats and get outs and things like that. The government have already indicated that we might be in a position where once we get to that, if we look at that diagram, once the 4 months notice period has been given and we hit the 23 months, we can still decide whether or not we need to give longer, and we might need to notify people. All the detail has yet to be confirmed. But in effect, what the government are trying to get us to do is start then and go through that process per this diagram very quickly without stopping. It would, you know, the idea is that rather than we do stop. It feels a bit, I suppose, maybe could be perceived as a bit of a runaway train. The government have indicated that there may be caveats to this and ways that we can review the position at the end of that 4 months, as I say, but we are awaiting that detail, so I can't be any clearer at this time. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. No, that helped me. Okay, I've got Councillor Mackay, please.
Thank you. It's taken the country hundreds of years to get in the mess in local authorities that we've got in now, with parish councils, district councils, unitary authorities, cities, Manchester different from anywhere, as is London. And the government, let's be honest about it, I think most people, the fundamental idea of the government to say that unitary authorities are better than the current arrangement in places like Kent or Surrey is the way forward. And they've chosen 500,000 as their ideal. Currently, Kent has one of the largest populations for an authority. It's taken us, like I say, hundreds of years to get into the mess we're in now. And the last two speakers, by the way, when they were talking about roads, almost demonstrated what was wrong with it. It's not Maidstone's fault that the South Road wasn't built. That was Kent County Council. You know, I mean, that's madness, isn't it? Now, I would say a lot of what we're discussing tonight will be history once the government says that in Kent, will be the map of the 3 or 4 authorities. Once that happens, let's assume our favoured choices agreed with Tunbridge, Tunbridge Wells, and Sevenoaks and Maidstone. Then immediately, I suspect, or I hope, a dialogue starts with those councils, and they've got to start looking at plans to cover the new unitary authority, not just Maidstone. Currently, we're living in our small world of Maidstone Borough Council. Once the government says which authorities we will align with, those authorities will have to sit together and come together with one plan for housing one plan for everything. And so Mark's, well, we've got to wait 4 months for this and 4 months for that. Every authority will be at different stages. Every authority will have slightly different ways of doing things, but very quickly they will need to come together as one if it's to be worked for everyone. Now, you know, so all we're really waiting for is the government to say, right, you will work with these authorities. And all councils across the UK are waiting for that. Now, that is, once that ball is kicked into touch, so many things we've been discussing tonight are off the table, really. So I'll just wait. I hope the government gets his bloody finger out. Yeah. Because I think fundamentally, what it is doing is right. It is right. And it's right for the country, it's right for the people. And if you gave it 10 years, it would take 15. And I think the government is probably going to say you're going to do this in 2 years and hope that it ends in 4. But there'll be a lot of people working against it.
Thank you. You can tell them, Malcolm, as well. The government straight line up. But the other thing to be cognizant of is that when we're working with Sevenoaks, they're 93% greenbelt. When we're working with Tunbridge Wells, they've got the high wheeled national landscape area. So, you know, when we're working with, it may be a good idea to plan. I can see Mark Edgerton indicating, and then I've got Councillor Dawes, Councillor Burke.
There is a relevant technical issue in all of this as well. We need to consider what is going to potentially happen, what influence we can have as we move forward into the unitary authority. Councillor Mackay has indicated an important point here, and Councillor Russell has elaborated on it. The fact of the matter is that the housing requirements, the housing needs, which are set by the government, won't go away just because we unitarise. So what will happen is Maidstone's total will be added, for example, to Tunbridge and Moorling's total, to Tunbridge Wells total, to Sevenoaks total, and 1,300 units will turn into 5,000 plus units. And we have to consider the designations that will lie in those areas. What is Maidstone's best approach to ensure that its interests are kept at heart in the same way as those other boroughs may wish to do so, and that is to get a local plan in place and keep it up to date. Because what our experience is sort of explaining at the moment is, if you take, for example, North Yorkshire, when they unitarise, the individual components, the boroughs and districts within that new unitary, if they've advanced far enough with their local plans, that will continue under the umbrella of the new unitary, and it will be 5 years hence before the new unitary starts and gets things done under one single umbrella with one single unitary development plan. So there is quite a bit to play for in theory, notwithstanding all the uncertainty, for boroughs and districts such as Maidstone to get forward and start moving with their new plans. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dawes.
Sorry, thank you, Mrs. Chair. I wanted to thank Councillor Fields for his pointing out the difficulties that the government is putting us under. And that is something that I've always thought. I mean, I've only been in the country for 20 years, just over 20 years. And I've seen the country politics getting worse and worse, especially over the last 5 years. Increasingly, that's what actually brought me into becoming a local councillor and get involved in local politics. So unfortunately, I have a very poor view of what central governments are imposing on local governments, and I really feel like local government are the only thing that was actually holding the countries together over the past 5 years. And I feel strongly against the local government reviews that are breaking down those things that was holding the countries together. And in light of what you're saying, that they are putting us in a very completely impossible positions of having officers both working really hard at and spending a lot of public money on local government review, as well as trying to get a new local plan being built in half the times, which is impossible I don't quite and I'd like to see us moving forwards with a local plan anyway, because when if we move into a unitary authority, we need to protect our residents for things not to be built in the wrong places where we don't have enough road infrastructures in place. But what I didn't like the comments of making an allegation that these administrations that have just been voted in May 2024 have failed to actually supply a ring road in the south of Maidstone, because that, even if I've been here 20 years, every resident knows that this plan have been going forward for over 30 years. And this administration in that corners and sit in oppositions have been at the head of Maidstone Borough Council for over 10 years or 20 years, and you haven't provided that ring road neither. So how could you dare putting this particular allegation on this administration that have just been voted in May 2024 is beyond me, really. I'm an independent. I don't like party politics, but it's. Yeah.
Before you go on, I'm coming back on that because you did level some allegations there. So, with brevity, the last local plan review had a hook left in it for the Leeds Langley Relief Road. That hook still remains in policy terms. That's very separate to then financing it. We had a line in the capital budget to start some preliminary investigation work for the Leeds Langley Relief Road in that capital budget. That has been removed by this administration. Two very separate things. One is a policy thing, one is a finance thing. The way you go with that is down to you, but to wrap it all up and send it our way is not correct. Councillor English, and then back to Councillor Dawes.
The fundamental thing is Maidstone Borough Council under any administration is not and has never been the highway authority. So the fundamental issue has been and remains that the Highway Authority had a scheme for a Leeds Langley bypass 15 years ago or so. It was not the Borough Council that did not take that scheme forward. It was circumstances, and I won't go into all the circumstances, but they were not anything to do with MBC. Now, we can argue about all sorts of things, but fundamentally, the Highway Authority is the organisation that is supposed to bring forward highway and other transport improvements. MBC can help. It can put the right hooks. You mentioned a hook. I don't particularly agree with that hook, but the hook is there. But it is not MBC under any administration, Conservative, Liberal, Democrat, coalition or whatever, that is fundamentally to blame for the fact that this infrastructure has not come forward. And I don't think previous Conservative administrations, the Garland administration or Eric Hotson's administration, were any different than the Liberal Democrat Green administration at the moment in not being the primary mover in these circumstances. And yes, we can argue about who's responsible and whatever, but pretending that Kent County Council, which is responsible primarily for particular chunks of infrastructure, not just roads, but education and so on, is not responsible for it. It's all down to the Maidstone Borough Council's flawed local plans over the years, is at best disingenuous and at worst misleading. What I would say is it would be an awful lot better, wouldn't it, if instead of blaming each other for where we are now, but we go forward with this process and try and follow whatever the evidence from this process suggests is the solution. Now, if I'm proved wrong about certain highway projects, I am prepared to go with the evidence demonstrating that. I would hope other people would be willing to go with the evidence that we come out of this process with, because it's having all this mutual recrimination is not getting us anywhere, and we need to have a process where we can go forward with some degree of confidence and follow the evidence. And that's what I hope we will get out of the next couple of years, because if we don't, the next unitary authority will be starting off on a misstep, which it might not have to make.
Thank you. No clapping from the committee. Right, Councillor Burke.
Thank you. No. Oh, it is. Sorry, couldn't see the light. So going back to this then, so I've had a look at it. We are where we are, not where we want to be. We all understand that. We need to push ahead with it. I think it will not go down too well. So for me to be comfortable behind it, what I would like to know from a council point of view, is there a recent formal resourcing impact assessment to look at what resources we have in the council? Because if we're going to be doing 3 or 4 big tasks, I will not be comfortable to sit here and say, let's just get on with it, if we don't have it in black and white, the actual formal resource impact assessment of how it would affect the council. Going into what my colleague said next to me, what will drop? And I would like to see something formal around our staffing, where we are now and what we might need. But I would like to see it, because if not, whilst I think recommendation number 3 is a waste of time writing to the government, there's no other option that I would be comfortable to sort of support or recommend other than that, to at least show that us as a council are expressing our views formally to the government. And then we're going to have to crack on and do it anyway. I fully appreciate that. But I couldn't in good conscience not raise my concerns formally through the council to the government before we proceed. And that's all I need to say.
Councillor English.
If it, I don't want to try and write your recommendations for you. That's certainly not my job. But if the Overview and Scrutiny Committee are raising issues of staff resourcing and so on, that is a perfectly legitimate point to raise and to transmit on to the Cabinet and for a response. Just an observation.
Right. I'm going to take us back to the recommendations that we have on page 24. Now, these are the recommendations that came forward from the planning, I can never remember what it's, Planning Healthier, Stronger Communities pack last week. So I think we should probably go down and maybe add a couple as we go. So I think number 1 is the factors influencing the production of a new local plan and the indicative timetable for undertaking the process be noted. Is that agreed? Right. Then if we add in number 2, picking up Councillor Burke's point, that we ask Cabinet for a briefing regard. Thank you. That's a good technical term. Ask Cabinet for a detailed impact assessment of the for the production of a new local plan. Ask Cabinet for a detailed impact assessment for the resources in the planning department.
Into that.
Yeah.
I also, it might make a hell of a lot more work, but I think if there's so much going on, I don't think it's just going to affect potentially planning department. If there's so much going on in one area, I think you might need to look slightly wider potentially around other things that it could impact if you have to move resource around. I don't know how we word that, but it could be a resource impact assessment for the whole council. But I think we need to know what potentially might come.
I am going to defer to the Chair of Audit, Governance and Standards, because we operate a risk register through AGS, don't we? So I'm presuming that having a local plan and not having a local plan is a current risk and ranked anyway.
There is a mature risk assessment process within the council that is presented to Audit, Governance and Standards. I think to deliver what Councillor Burke has suggested, a simple addition of and resources on planning committee, as we've said, and wider senior management functions. Would that satisfy you, Councillor Burke?
Yeah, I'll read it and then I can let you know if it satisfies me.
So to clarify, I think for clarity, number 2 should be ask that the Cabinet undertake a detailed resource impact assessment of the strategic planning and economic development service area, along with potential for wider impacts associated with commencing and producing a new local plan. Is that agreed for that for number 2? We happy for that to go forward? Okay. And then, so the original number 2, which would now be number 3, the decision to commence the production of the new local plan be agreed, and that officers may undertake the preliminary works associated with this outlined in the next steps action section of this report. I don't see that the 2 need to be, one can go, they can both go forward at the same time. So on that basis, I'm prepared to have a look at that at number 3. Is that accepted by the committee that we agree that? Councillor Cook is shaking his head. So we'll have a vote on that one then. So number 3, agree as per the papers, but it's now number 3, not number 2, because we've added a number 2. No, number 3. So just so that we can go in actual preparation order. Pardon? I missed your poetry and I can only apologise because I'm sure it was fantastic. Option 3 is written exactly as what is option 2, because it makes more sense that we have the number 2, which was asking the Cabinet, and we've done that. So number 3 is the decision to commence production of a new local plan be agreed, and that officers may undertake the preliminary works associated with this as outlined in the next steps section of this report. And I think we're going to need to take a vote on this. So votes in favour and against and no abstentions. Right, so that is carried. And then our number 4 is the Cabinet Member for Planning Policy and Management writes to the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government to express concerns regarding the ability to produce a local plan in the context of local government reorganisation and current lack of regulations and guidance on the new planning system and the implications of this delay to plan making on matters such as the 5-year housing land supply. Everyone agreed with that? Oh, no, Councillor Mackay would like to go against or abstain.
No, it's just a waste of time, waste of paper, waste of resources.
We'll call for a vote then. He doesn't want to write upwards. So those in favour of writing the letter, I don't see what harm it can do. Those against, yeah, abstentions, right, thank you. And then we've got the number 5, which would be the officers will bring a report back to this committee and Cabinet in April 2026 with a position update. That might actually be us in May, because presuming that's come forward from planning pack, so it'll be planning pack and Cabinet in April 2026. We may be able to comment on that. Yeah. or we can ask for an update whenever we like, because we have that power. So let's keep it as April. But so all those in favour of item 5? Against? Abstentions? Okay, that's carried. And then thinking back to what we were thinking about earlier, I propose that we add on a number 6, which is that we ask the Cabinet to start thinking about commencing a SIL, Section 106, Section 278 infrastructure, review thought process at the end of this local plan period, which we may or may not be here for. Votes in favour? And against? And abstentions? Okay, that's carried. Thank you. Right. That takes us to the end of this evening's agenda. Thank you all for your, and thank you very much, Helen Smith, for joining us remotely. I declare this meeting is closed. Thank you.